Well, good morning. We're going to talk about messy mangers and minimum wage today, the way of wisdom. We're continuing this stuff. But before we talk about these things, I would like you to pull out something to write with, because I'm going to ask you some questions that I think will impact your next 4 weeks. So pull out something to write with, a pen and some paper. And as soon as you have that, I'm going to ask you to do something else. Here's a question for you, but I don't want you to write the answer down, and you may not even speak it, but I want you to turn to look at somebody next to you, look them right in the face, and ask yourself, are they wise? Is this a wise person? Oh, no, I didn't say laugh at them. And maybe don't write it down, but are they wise? Is this a wise person I'm seated next to? Yeah, I know some of you are discussing whether or not you should still be sitting next to each other. Messy mangers and minimum wage have to do with discipline, and wisdom and discipline are wed together in the book of Proverbs. You can't have one without the other. Chelsea just read for us a whole litany of passages from Scripture, or from the book of Proverbs, and it begins with Solomon. Saying this is what it's for. This is for attaining wisdom and discipline, for acquiring discipline in a prudent life. The Proverbs are about wisdom, and wisdom and discipline just go together. You can't have one without the other. It's impossible to separate them. One of my favorite verses to this point is from, and Chelsea read it to us, this is the NIV 84. It has it this way: whoever loves discipline loves knowledge, but those who hate correction are stupid. It's that simple. If you love discipline, you love knowledge. If you resist discipline, you're stupid. Now, I might ask you to look at your neighbor again and say, look at them, are they wise? Are they ones who love discipline? Well, there are two kinds of discipline that Scripture talks about, and the book of Proverbs does too. We're only going to look at one of them. The first is the discipline in which we are treated as children of God, and our discipline that is corrected and given opportunity to grow for our own sake. The other type of discipline that we're going to focus on today has to do not with discipline that comes to us from without, but discipline that comes from within. Self-discipline. And what does it mean to be self-disciplined? Well, let me ask this question. What is it? How would you define discipline? There's probably a lot of ways to do it. This is my definition. Discipline's this: it's freely doing what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, to get someplace worth going. And there's a number of preoperative words here that really make a difference between acting in a disciplined way and acting some other way. And the first one has to do with this, that we freely do things. Discipline is an act of freedom. We take it on. It's different than compulsion. It's different than being driven. It's different than addiction. Discipline grows out of a quiet, centered place where you don't have to distract yourself. You don't have to act out of anxiety or concern. You can freely choose what you choose. I was talking to a student the other day who said they were realizing about themselves that they live a very busy life. It may not be, though, that their busyness is always healthy. It might be that they're busy so they avoid sitting down calmly and quietly and choosing freely what they're going to give their time to. It's so much easier to turn on Facebook and see what's happening. So much easier to just check your phone for what texts have come in that you can respond to. It's easier to wander down the hall and see what's going on next door than to calmly sit and make free choices. Discipline is not drivenness or addiction. It's freely chosen, and it's something that needs to be done. In the doing of this, doing the things that need to be done. Our culture tells us that a lot of things are needful. Appearance is needful. How you look, that's mostly it. No, discipline's about doing stuff. It's not about wanting to do stuff. It's not about thinking about doing stuff. It's not even about wanting to be a person who wants to do stuff. It's about doing what needs to be done. And moreover than that, it's important to do it when it needs to be done. Now, when the Proverbs were collected, of course, they were assembled by an agricultural society. These people lived and died by what happened in the land. And often, mostly for the adults, what happened in the land is what they did with the land. Proverbs 25 says this, that this sluggard doesn't plow when it's the season to do so. And then in harvest time, they go out, but they find nothing. Well, of course, because if you don't plow when it's time to plow, you can't reap when it's time to reap. And likewise, 10 verses 5 says, the lazy one, or those who harvest in the summer are wise, but those who sleep during the harvest are a disgrace to their family. It's not just doing the right things, it's doing it when we need to do it. How many are feeling behind at this point in the semester? Yeah, it's not a good time to be behind. Early in the semester, it's easy to be behind because you have all semester to catch up, of course. Now you've got a short amount of time. Doing things when they need to be done is a challenge. And finally, discipline is about getting someplace that's really worth going. Not allowing yourself to just be pushed around by the things that want your attention, what other people suggest for you, some plan that somebody else has for your time and attention. And believe me, people have plans for your time and attention. The marketing industry is one of the largest ones. I was surprised to learn recently that Walmart spends $2.5 billion on marketing. And what does Walmart sell? Like cheap kitchen mops, right? And low-end clothing, right? But they want your attention so bad that it's a worthwhile investment to put $2.5 billion into grabbing your attention. If you don't know where you're going to go or can't decide what is a place worth getting to, someone else will tell you and lead you there. So discipline is freely doing what needs to be done when it needs to be done to get someplace that's worth going. Now look at your neighbor again. Are they disciplined? What would they say about you? What would they say about you? And let me ask you this question too. What influence do you have on those people you spend the most time with? Do you help them do the things that need doing when it's time to do them to get someplace that's worth going? Or do you distract them from what needs doing? Do you help them delay doing it? Do you suggest places that really aren't worth going? Those are tough questions to ask. Think about ourselves. Well, discipline and freedom. I chose this title of Messy Mangers and Minimum Wage because it comes from these two interesting proverbs. The first one, Proverbs 14:4, says, "Where there are no oxen, the manger is empty." Or some translations say the manger is clean. But from the strength of an ox comes an abundant harvest. Which is saying this, you might have a life that's pretty easy. An empty manger doesn't have to be filled. A barnyard with no oxen in it doesn't have to be mucked out. There's no crap to shovel around. And you might like a life that doesn't have any crap in it or doesn't require any investment into it. Where there are no oxen, then the manger's clean. It doesn't cost you anything, and it doesn't require attention. But from the strength of an ox comes a great harvest, an abundant harvest. Are you willing to invite the things into your life and control the things in your life that can lead you somewhere? If not, here's the promise about minimum wage. Minimum wage is not a concept that we find in Scripture. Rather, they just talked about slave labor. In Proverbs 12:24 says it this way, diligent hands will rule. Diligent hands will rule, but laziness ends in slave labor. Now, I don't think any of you are going to become slaves, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of our graduates end up at minimum wage. And why? Because they're not disciplined, knowing where they want to go and doing the things that need doing when they need doing to get there. Scripture is an extremely practical book. We make it spiritual sometimes when it's not trying to be. This is just trying to be practical. Diligent hands, the ones who lay hold of stuff to do what needs to be done to get a place worth going, end up there and they rule, they have influence. They get to determine where they're going and what's going on. But laziness results in working for somebody else. It's that practical. Discipline and freedom sometimes seem contradictory, especially when we're kids. You might have had some arguments with your parents about how controlling they were when they were guiding you and setting some limits, exercising external discipline or stirring up some self-discipline within you. But actually, freedom and discipline come right together just like wisdom and discipline. They are connected so intimately with one another that discipline grows out of the free exercise of our freedom. That's redundant, isn't it? It grows out of our freedom, but it also results in greater freedom. If we don't exercise the freedom we have, we lose it. When we exercise that freedom in discipline, we gain even more. Jerry Sitzer is an author and a writer, an English professor, and a pastor. We use one of his books in the Elijah Project called The Will of God is a Way of Life, and in it he says this. He says that athletes and artists, they understand the true nature of freedom. They understand the true nature of freedom. For they give up the freedom to do whatever they want, and they take on a rigorous discipline of practice so that in the end they have the true freedom to perform at the top level of artistry and athleticism. Their control of their freedom results in greater freedom. And the same is true with us. If we accept our freedom calmly and hopefully, then we can apply ourselves to things which in the end give us greater freedom. It's John Coltrane on the top there. How many hours do you think that man blew into a reed before he played a Love Supreme? I don't know, hours and hours and hours. Athletes here know what I'm talking about. You cannot have the freedom to perform on the field the way you would like or on the court the way you would like unless you first have subjected yourself to the discipline required to become someone who can perform in that way. Freedom and discipline, they go together. Grows out of our freedom and results in greater freedom. You might be not familiar with this name, Walter Mischel. He's a psychologist at UCLA, and during the 60s and 70s did a lot of interesting work on personality. You may not know his name, but you might know one of his experiments, which became well known. It's called the marshmallow experiment. You guys know this? What he did is he took a bunch of 4-year-olds, and his daughters were young themselves at the time, and they put them in a room with a marshmallow. And he said, hey, listen, if you want, you can eat the marshmallow. Just hit the little ding bell. Ding. It says, I'm done. I want to eat the marshmallow. But if you can wait for 20 minutes, it's a long time. If you can wait for 20 minutes without hitting the bell or eating the marshmallow, then I'll come back and I'll bring you a second, and you'll have 2 that you can eat. Simple enough, right? Well, self-discipline, it hadn't been studied, and he was mostly interested in brain development. What happens between 3 and 5 years old that allows people to exercise discipline? And it can be difficult. You see, this is a more contemporary version of this. I think actually it was a church that filmed these kids, and you can see, they engage it in different ways. He's about to smell it here. He distracts himself with knocking on his head, kicks the table, and sometimes it's great anguish. This is really painful, But here's what's interesting. As his kids grew up, about 10 or 12, 15 years later, he asked his daughters one night around the dinner table, hey, whatever happened to Susie? Or are you in touch with Eric anymore? They said, yeah, we're still in class together at high school. And he said, well, how are they doing? And from their reports, some were doing great, some were not doing good. Some were getting in trouble, some were having trouble passing classes. And he took their just anecdotal reports and went back to the original observations. And he found a strong correlation between the kids who could resist eating the marshmallow, performing well now in high school, and the kids who gobbled it right down, performing poorly. So he decided to do a systematic survey of those 653 kids who had done the marshmallow test when they were little toddlers to see where they were in life right now. And he tracked them through their 30s. And he found profound differences. That folks who had trouble exercising self-control or discipline, delayed gratification, they were more likely to be overweight, more likely to abuse drugs, more likely to have difficulty handling stress in difficult situations. Whereas the folks who the children, back with their marshmallow, who could wait 20 minutes, were had excelled in school, were holding jobs that they enjoyed more, and were dealing better with stress. In fact, he found that a 15-minute difference in dealing with the marshmallow when it came to late high school made 210 points difference on an SAT. Isn't that amazing? 210 points for 15. Now, that's not to say that some people can resist marshmallows and others can't. We can all learn to exercise discipline. And the little things add up. Annie Dillard said, what I do with my minutes is what I'm doing with my life. What I do with my minutes is what I do with my life. So how do you exercise discipline? We all probably want it. We all probably know that there are ways we would like to be better. I'd like to be in better shape. I'd like to have memorized more scripture and other things I'm reading. I'd like to read faster and read more. I'd like to write more. I'd like to be in touch with my friends on a more consistent basis, be a more supporting son and a more loving husband and a more diligent father. So many things I'd like to do better. But how do I get there? How do I exercise the discipline to do that? Here's a couple ways. One, you got to know it needs to be done. That is, have a vision for where you want to go. Do you know where you're going? Do you have a vision for it? A clear picture for it? And then, like I said before, if you don't have a clear picture for your life, somebody else does. And it won't be where you would want to go. And here's the next one, and this is powerful. Know why it needs to be done. One thing that Marshall found out is that there are what he called hot triggers, hot stimulus, and cool stimulus. Hot stimulus are the things that are right in front of us, right now, calling for attention, like that marshmallow right there, looking at. The kids who stared at it ended up eating it. But the ones who turned away, who covered their eyes, who kicked the table, who did this, they turned it into they cooled it down a little bit. Do you know why? When I was in college, I worked this job. We worked literally 80 hours a week. I lived away from home, covered all of my expenses, food, laundry, housing, transportation, everything. And I hated it. I hated it the first summer, and then I kept doing it over and over again until I got better at it, and I never really learned to love it, but I did get better at it. But here was one of the things for me that got me through. The first summer I was doing this, it was a really tough job, emotionally draining for me, hard work. We would get up at 5:55 in the morning and go for a 2-mile run, me and my roommates. And we would run, and every bit of that running, I would be thinking about the day and praying through the day. Actually, it was more like 1.5 miles, not quite 2 miles. In the last stretch, I vowed to myself, I'm going to beat these guys home for my dad. Why? Dad doesn't care. He's not even going to know that I'm up running this morning. But I'm going to do it for my dad because I cared about my dad. Wanted him to be, he would never know, but I would do it for him. And that would give me the gumption to work harder and to press on. In that summer, about the 5th week, or maybe probably 3rd week, I guess it was Father's Day coming up. And the company I worked for said, listen, if you hit a certain target, we're going to send your dad a gift just to tell him what great work you're doing. Well, I had my best summer, or my best week of the summer that week, because I had a hot reason, something that motivated me. I had a reason, an emotional reason that moved me. Not just because I wanted to do it because it was a good idea, not just because I wanted to excel to prove something to myself, but because I wanted to give the gift of a better self back to my dad. And that motivated me. What is it that motivates you to do that thing? Get in touch with that emotion, that hot reason, the stimulus that really moves your emotion. If you're an athlete, it might be an imagination of postseason play. It might be being able to shake the hands of your opponents at the end of the season, winning the championship game and knowing you had us last year, but this one belongs to us. It might be turning in a paper to your professor, showing him the best you could do. And you need to know what you can do. Not a big thing, not a giant thing, what you can do right now. What's the next step you can take? A small little action. And finally, you've got to do it. You've got to act on it. One of the passages that Chelsea read for us said, the sluggard craves and craves, but are never satisfied. But the diligent have a satisfied soul. You got to do it now. There's power in what we do. So here are my questions for you. December 19th, 1 month from now, we'll be about a day away from, most of you will be done with finals. A couple of you will be wrapping up your last tests. 4 weeks, 1 month. Where do you want to be? Where do you want to be academically? Where do you want to be physically? And again, make it real. Not, I want to be a competitive bodybuilder. No, I just want to be in a little better shape. You can't turn your entire GPA around, but you can hit a target within a certain class. Where do you want to be? And why do you want to be there? What is that emotional reason that you can tie to it? Scripture uses all kinds of images of starvation and prosperity because that's where they lived. Work hard now, eat later. Take a nap now, starve. But what is it for you? What can you do to get there? What step can you take today? And finally, start it. Just do it. Goethe said this, whatever you can do or think you can do, begin it. In action, there is magic and grace and power. Get to it. St. Francis of Assisi put it this way, do what is necessary. Start by what is necessary. And then do what is possible, and in time, you'll be doing the impossible. What feels impossible to you for December 19th that you can take action on today? Let's be wise, love discipline, and receive the benefit that God has for us. Go in courage.